1925. A workshop in Chertsey, Surrey. Two men push a steel box on tracks out into the yard. It is roughly the size of a bathtub. Two men sit inside it, side by side, their shoulders touching. A Ford car engine running between their legs. A single machine gun is bolted to the right side. The whole vehicle stands barely chest high on a grown man. The tracks are narrow. The armour is thin enough to dent with a pickaxe. It looked like a toy. It looked like a joke. The infantry officers who watched it move across the yard called it a sardine tin. The press called it a baby tank. Men who had driven real tanks through the Somme looked at it and shook their heads. Within 3 years, the British Army had ordered hundreds. Within 5 years, 16 nations had purchased the design or a production license. Within a decade, Soviet factories were building thousands of copies. Italian engineers had evolved it into their primary armoured vehicle. Polish crews had taken a derivative of it into battle and destroyed German tanks with it. The direct family line it started would eventually produce the most manufactured armoured fighting vehicle in history, with over 113,000 built. Its name was the Carden Loyd Tankette Mark VI, and it was the machine that taught the world how to move infantry under fire. To understand why the Carden Loyd existed, you need to understand the problem Britain faced after 1918. Machine guns had killed a generation of infantry crossing open ground. Full-size tanks were prohibitively expensive for an army strangled by peacetime budget cuts. The question the War Office asked was precise and brutal. Could a very small, very cheap tracked vehicle carry a machine gun forward fast enough to matter, and could an army afford enough of them to make a difference? The intellectual spark came from Major Gifford Lecaine Martel of the Royal Engineers, a First World War tank theorist who in 1925 built a one-man tank prototype on a rotating table in his garage in Camberley, using a Maxwell engine, commercial tracks, a truck axle, and a wooden body. The War Office was intrigued. It contracted a small manufacturer to build 4 prototypes. The concept had a name, the Tankette. The men who turned that concept into a weapon were Sir John Valentine Carden and Captain Vivian Loyd. Carden was a self-taught engineer who had manufactured cycle cars before the First World War. He was quiet, intensely focused, and capable of solving mechanical problems that defeated formally trained engineers. Loyd was an artillery officer, a Welshman who had served in India and Mesopotamia, won the Military Cross, and contracted tuberculosis that plagued him for decades. He was the organiser and salesman. Around 1922, the two men founded Carden Loyd Tractors Limited in Chertsey, Surrey. Carden designed, Loyd sold. The first prototype they delivered to the War Office in March 1926 was a one-man vehicle. The operator had to drive and fire simultaneously. It was physically impossible to do both competently under fire. The Mark II improved the suspension. The Mark III refined it further. But every one-man variant shared the same fatal flaw. The breakthrough came with a two-man layout. The driver on the left, the gunner on the right. It sounds obvious. Nothing in military engineering ever is. By 1928, Vickers Armstrongs had acquired Carden Loyd tractors outright, and the Mark VI was in production. It weighed 1.5 tons. It was 2.46 metres long, 1.75 metres wide and 1.22 metres tall. The armour ranged from 6 to 9 millimetres of riveted plate, sufficient to stop rifle bullets and light shrapnel, and nothing else. The engine was a Ford Model T 4-cylinder unit. It pushed the vehicle to roughly 40 km per hour on roads and around 9 km per hour across rough country. The crew breathed exhaust fumes and sat on a suspension so violent that 20 minutes of cross-country travel produced severe headaches and 30 minutes produced incapacitation. The gun was a .303 Vickers water-cooled machine gun with approximately 1,000 rounds. The production cost was £400 per vehicle, roughly 1/3 the price of a French Renault FT tank. That price was the point. At £400, an army could afford hundreds. At £400, even a small nation could field a mechanised force. At £400, Britain could field enough of them to experiment, to learn, to build doctrine. The British Army fielded its Carden Loyds with the Experimental Mechanised Force, formed in August 1927 at Tidworth on Salisbury Plain. This was one of the world's first combined arms mechanised formations, built to test the theories that Fuller, Liddell Hart and Broad were writing about, with real steel on real ground. Foreign observers attended its exercises. Belgian officers watched. Soviet officers watched. German officers took careful notes about what they saw and what it implied. Now, before we reach the battlefields where the Carden Loyd and its descendants fought, if you are finding this deep dive into British armoured innovation useful, hit subscribe. It takes a second, costs nothing, and helps this channel grow. In the Gran Chaco of South America, Bolivia deployed 5 Carden Loyd Tankettes in 1932. The Chaco War was a brutal conflict fought in extreme heat across dense bush country, and the Tankettes were wholly unsuited to it. The armour stopped nothing a bolt-action rifle could not penetrate at close range. The suspension defeated the terrain. At the Battle of Nanawar in July 1933, one Tankette was disabled by machine gun fire, and another became stuck in a ditch. The Bolivians withdrew them from the front line. They had proven one lesson clearly. A 400-pound vehicle with 9 millimetres of armour could not fight a war. Every army that bought the Carden Loyd and every army that copied it would eventually learn the same. The Soviet Union purchased 20 Mark VI Tankettes around 1930 and a production license. Their engineers studied the vehicle and essentially redesigned it from the ground up. The result, designated the T-27, entered service on February 13, 1931. Between 2,500 and 3,300 T-27s were built, making it the foundation of Soviet armoured mass production. By January 1, 1941, over 2,100 of them remained in Red Army service. In November and December of 1941, during the Battle of Moscow, T-27s were committed in desperation against German armour. Their 7.62mm armour could be penetrated by standard German rifle rounds at 200 metres. The last confirmed T-27 combat action occurred on December 1, 1941, near Yakroma. It was, in every practical sense, a slaughter. Italy purchased the design in 1929 and evolved it into the Caro Veloce series, the CV-33 and CV-35. The L3, as it was later designated, became Italy's most numerous armoured vehicle, with roughly 2,500 built. In the Second Italo-Ethiopian War of 1935 and 1936, 500 L3 Tankettes deployed against Ethiopian forces who initially lacked anti-tank weapons. The Tankettes advanced. They inflicted casualties. Italian generals declared victory for the concept. They were wrong. At the Battle of Dembaguina Pass in December 1935, approximately 2,000 Ethiopian fighters under Ras Imru Haile Selassie overran a platoon of 6 L3 Tankettes. The fighters flipped the vehicles, immobilized them, and set them on fire. Italian crews coined 3 nicknames that year: Scatola di Sardine, Sardine Tins, Casa da Morto, Coffins, Baradaxiaio, Iron Coffins. The Spanish Civil War delivered the final verdict. At the Battle of Guadalajara in March 1937, roughly 100 Italian CV-33 and CV-35 Tankettes advanced with the Corpo Truppa Volontari. Rain turned the ground to mud. The L3s, with their narrow tracks, became stuck. Soviet T-26 tanks with wider tracks and a proper 45mm gun manoeuvred freely and destroyed the immobilized Italian vehicles. The L3's machine guns could not penetrate the T-26 at any range. Italian dead numbered in the thousands. The Corpo Truppa Volontari lost the battle. Italy's general staff failed to draw the lesson and entered the Second World War in 1940, with L3 Tankettes still forming the backbone of their armoured force. Poland tells a different story. Poland purchased 11 Carden Loyds in 1929 plus a production licence, and developed the TK3 and the TKS, building roughly 575 Polish Tankettes in total. Most were armed with a 7.92mm machine gun. But in 1939, approximately 24 TKS Tankettes had been fitted with a 20mm autocannon, and in the hands of the right crew, they were deadly. Officer Cadet Edmund Orlik commanded one of those 24 vehicles during the September campaign of 1939. His driver was Corporal Zakrzewski. The Germans called the tiny Polish Tankettes kakerlaken, cockroaches, meaning it as contempt. The Polish crews wore the name with pride. On September 18th, 1939, near the village of Pociecha in the Campinos forest, Orlik's 3-vehicle half-platoon encountered a German armoured column, 2 Panzer 35T tanks, and 1 Panzer IV, commanded by a Prussian duke named Lieutenant Victor Albrecht von Ratibor. Orlik sent his 2 machine-gun-armed wingmen into cover and attacked alone. He destroyed the lead Panzer 35T, displaced to a new position, then fired a full 20mm magazine into the Panzer IV's side armour and set it ablaze. Prince Ratibor was badly burned and died of his injuries. A captured German officer later told Orlik, "It is very hard to hit such a small cockroach with a gun." The following day at Sierraco, Orlik claimed 7 more German tanks. His total across the campaign stands at 10 to 13 confirmed kills. He received the Cross of Valour, fought through the Siege of Warsaw, then joined the resistance. He survived the war, became an architect, and died in a road accident on April 8, 1982. The video game World of Tanks awards a medal in his honour for destroying multiple higher-tier enemy vehicles with a lighter one. On paper, the French Renault UE Chenilette looks like a rational competitor to the Carden Loyd concept. It was heavier, better powered, and produced in greater numbers, over 5,168 vehicles, from 1932 to 1940, but the French made a deliberate doctrinal choice to remove weapons from it entirely, designing a pure logistics vehicle for moving ammunition to the front. That choice reflected a fundamentally different military philosophy. The British built the Carden Loyd to fight forward, the French built the Renault UE to support from behind. Both choices were defensible in theory. Neither survived contact with German armour in 1940. The Carden Loyd's true legacy was not the vehicle itself, it was the idea it proved and then outgrew. By 1934, Vickers Armstrongs had evolved the basic layout through new suspension technology, a proper V8 engine, and a crew layout that made the vehicle practical for sustained operations. By 1936, the machine gun carrier had entered British service. By 1937, the Bren gun carrier contract was placed. By 1940, all previous variants had been unified into a single design. The Universal Carrier, 113,000 Universal Carriers, were built across Britain, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, making it the most produced armoured fighting vehicle in history. Adding the related Loyd carrier, designed and manufactured by Vivian Loyd's own post-war company, with 26,000 built, the direct family line reaches nearly 140,000 vehicles. The Universal Carrier served as machine gun platform, mortar carrier, artillery tractor, ambulance, cable layer, and reconnaissance vehicle on every front of the Second World War. Every one of them traces its lineage to the bathtub-sized steel box that two men pushed out of a Surrey workshop in 1925. There is one more irony worth stating directly. John Carden, the engineering genius who designed the vehicle, died in December 1935 at the age of 43, killed when a Savoia Marchetti airliner, designed by Italian engineers whose army had bought his Tankette, crashed at Tatsfield in Surrey. He never saw the war his invention helped shape. Returned to that yard in Chertsey, 1925. The steel box on tracks sits in weak English sunlight. It was underpowered. It had armour that a heavy machine gun could defeat at 300 metres. Its suspension could incapacitate a crew in 30 minutes of rough ground. It was open to the sky. It could not fight anything armoured and win. And yet 16 nations purchased the design, and yet Soviet factories built over 3,000 copies, and yet a Polish officer cadet used a refined descendant to destroy a German duke's tank in a forest ambush and become a legend. And yet the family it founded produced the most manufactured armoured vehicle in human history. It did not win its own battles. It taught the world the question every army since has had to answer. How do you keep infantry alive when they are moving toward fire? Britain answered that question first. That is not luck. That is the difference between a garage in Chertsey